Dylan has really been fighting for us, and he knows so many legislators and introduces us to them, and we have a lot of meetings with the different legislators on your behalf. So take it away, Dylan.
Good morning or good afternoon, salutations. My name is Dylan Bishop. I'm an attorney in downtown Richmond, Virginia, where I mainly practice in government affairs, and from where I've had the pleasure of serving as the lobbyist for the Virginia Governmental Employees Association since 2018. I am indeed a former state employee myself. I spent time at the Department of Motor Vehicles in the Senate of Virginia, so it's been a pleasure and an honor to represent state employees across the Commonwealth for the last 5 years and hopefully well into the future if you'll have me. Today I'm here to provide an overview of what we accomplished in the 2022 General Assembly session, talk about some of the administrative actions that have taken place since that time, and then give you a preview of what we're looking forward to accomplishing in the 2023 General Assembly session that will gavel in here in January. It will be here before you know it. So during the 2022 General Assembly session, it was our first General Assembly session back in person since the COVID-19 pandemic. This was welcomed by many of the legislators and government affairs and lobbyists, of course, as well. Allows for more personal interface, gives us more opportunity to keep our ear to the ground, have the ability to figure out what's going on, why, where different initiatives may be going or not going. The 2022 General Assembly session also, we had some new faces, some new players. Of course, we had a new Republican governor, Governor Glenn Youngkin, who was sworn in on January the 15th. We had a new Republican House majority led by the new Speaker, Speaker Todd Gilbert. And we also had a new VGEA president at the helm, Ms. Cynthia Britton, who's been an absolute pleasure and delight to work with. The 2022 General Assembly session was a budget year, of course, and our legislative priorities at VGEA always prioritize compensation for our state employees and state-supported local employees. So we lobbied the budget hard and almost exclusively during this past General Assembly session. And it was a banner year for us. In terms of compensation generally, we were able to maintain a 10% raise for state employees over the next 2 years, which was certainly needed, necessary, but was a big win for us. So that's a 5% raise that became effective this past August 1st, and then of course coming up in the next year, July 1st of 2023. That second 5% raise will become effective if we are not successful in getting additional pay increases in the upcoming General Assembly session. Of course, that 10% raise, we were happy as a clam when that was announced, but since we were able to secure that 10% raise, we've seen a rapid rise in inflation. So of course, we're going to come back for more. We're not going to rest on our laurels, and I think a large contingency of the General Assembly, primarily those legislators that have some influence over state employee compensation, they're well aware of that. One legislator in particular, Senator Chap Peterson, who chairs the Senate Subcommittee over General Government, which deals with state employee compensation, he's had a keen interest on keeping track of inflation, and in fact has suggested that he would like to do more to make sure our state employees are keeping up not only with their private sector competitors, but with inflation as well and rising costs of living. So in addition to that 10% raise over the next 2 years, state employees can expect a $1,000 bonus effective December 1st of 2022. December 1st of 2020. December 1st of 2022. But I think the biggest success this past General Assembly session was the targeted compensation increases that we were able to work through and secure in the budget. Specifically with Department of Corrections. Department of Corrections, their recruitment and retention issues reached crisis levels over and through the COVID-19 pandemic, with turnover rates approaching 40%. Now, not only is that a human resources issue, but also a public safety issue. So what we were able to do by VGEA's participation in a compensation work group and study led by Delegate Patrick Hope out of Northern Virginia, and advocacy throughout the legislative session, we were able to increase the starting salary for correctional officers from $35,000 a year to $42,000 a year, a whopping 20% increase, with corresponding compensation compression adjustments for sergeants, captains, lieutenants, and majors to recognize their years of service to the Commonwealth and their institutional knowledge in those correctional facilities. In addition, probation and parole officers also got a $3,000 raise, which will become effective in fiscal year 2023. So that's a pretty good snapshot of the compensation issues that were addressed in the budget. Of course, with inflation, there's more to be desired, and we can always do more to make sure that our state employees are at least in the ballpark of the private sector competitors, particularly in those high skill and high turnover positions, which data shows often lags behind private sector competitors by 30% at times. In terms of our retirees, that's a huge segment of our membership, so they stay in the forefront of our minds as well. So we have a great working relationship with VRS and DHRM to make sure that our retirees are recognized for their years of service to the Commonwealth. But again, most of these issues are tied to the budget. So in the budget that was just passed, the General Assembly expedited the $750 million lump sum payment to VRS from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 22 based on surplus revenues. It seems like we're just shifting a payment 1 year earlier, but it has huge effects in terms of what that does for the Commonwealth, in terms of reducing liabilities, and that's actually a huge investment in our VRS fund, and expediting that payment will have exponential benefits for years to come. The General Assembly also set aside an additional $80 million to increase the funded status of the critically important retiree health care credit. So we're increasing that funded status by close to 30%. That means that fund and that health care, the retiree health credit, is alive and well, and may even be in a position to be increased in the future. When we've tried in the past to introduce legislation increasing the retirees' health insurance credit, one of the biggest pushbacks we received from VRS is that that fund had a large unfunded component, and increasing the amount of that benefit to our retirees would only increase the unfunded component of that benefit further, putting the Commonwealth in a precarious fiscal position. So by increasing the funded status, it increases the health and well-being and resiliency of that health insurance credit benefit for our retirees, and increases the likelihood that we can augment or grow that benefit in years to come. And then finally, the budget also required VRS to study return to work policy for individuals who have retired and wish to return to work in a VRS covered position without losing their retirement status and benefits. Again, this is another nod to our retirees to help make sure they can keep up with rising healthcare costs. If they so choose to return to work, perhaps on a part-time basis, they have that option without losing their existing retirement benefits. And this is also a means to address our recruitment and retention issue among the state workforce, in no small part. Our retirees are a reservoir of institutional knowledge and would be a great resource for the Commonwealth's agencies. So that pretty much sums up our victories and our accomplishments, the legislative topics that we grappled with during the 2022 General Assembly session. Of course, the General Assembly session was scheduled to end in early March, but the budget conferees were unable to reach a compromise. Governor Youngkin called a special session, and we were not able to finalize this budget until June 20th, almost coming down to the wire almost a week before the June 30th deadline, which is constitutionally mandated on the General Assembly. So this did cause some issue with some agencies, with some local governments. They were not able to properly plan. They didn't know what resources would or would not be available, but we were able to get this done in what seemed like yet another marathon General Assembly session. Hopefully this year in 2023, it's a non-budget year, but that doesn't mean that the General Assembly can't crack open the budget once again. It just means that they're not creating a budget from whole cloth once more. And, we will try to get into the budget allocation for fiscal year 2023 and try to address state employee compensation across the board to keep up with inflation. So you can anticipate that being top of our list in terms of our 2023 legislative agenda. So again, banner year for the VGEA. We addressed critical needs at Department of Corrections and provided relief to state employees across the board with that 10% raise over 2 years. Now, at the end as we were winding down the budget negotiations, as many of you guys well know and likely may rue the day, but some of you guys were likely excited to hear this, on May 5th, the Youngkin administration announced their revised telework policy. What that policy entailed was that state employees were expected to return to the office effective July 5th, so essentially a 2-month turnaround time. And state employees had 2 weeks to submit their telework application. This announcement presented myriad issues, and again, it came as a surprise to us. And administrations prior on both sides of the aisle, generally VGEA would get a heads up, and we could help inform relevant parties, state employees and retirees in particular, that something may be coming down the aisle. But like I said, we had a new administration come in. Many folks from the administration were not from the government bureaucracy. They were from private sector or from DC. So there was a little bit of institutional knowledge that may have been lacking there, but I'll go into it later how we're addressing that. And we're making great strides there with the Youngkin administration, and appreciate them coming back and trying to rectify that. So back to the revised telework policy. Again, it presented myriad issues for our state employees, not least of which is the quick turnaround time and the unexpected nature of this announcement. It was announced during Public Employee Appreciation Week, which was not a good start. This announcement made many public employees feel unappreciated. And perhaps if we had been in contact with the administration beforehand, we could have helped avoid that faux pas. But again, quick turnaround time presented issues, presented child care concerns, particularly with our employees with children with disabilities or young children. I've got many friends and colleagues that have young children, and I know even under the best of circumstances, it takes at least 6 to 8 months to find daycare placement. That's even, that issue was made more acute in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And, finding childcare placement is not something that most parents take lightly. It's something they want to take a deliberative approach to, find the right spot for their children, and in the best of circumstances, takes more time than 2 months. There are also concerns about employees that had elderly folks in their care, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles. And if they were required to return to work, they would have to find palliative care or somebody to come into the house or make other arrangements. Again, a time-consuming process, particularly if you're not expecting this, and that 2-month turnaround time puts that process even more so in a pressure cooker. We also had some instances where employees feared that they did not have an office to return to. We had some offices that had downsized during the COVID-19 pandemic. We had some offices that had announced to their employees that they were going to go on a remote or telework basis permanently thereafter. So, of course, this caused some concern if I'm supposed to be back in the office July 5th, but I'm not assigned to an office, or I was hired and the office I'm assigned to is 60, 80, 100 miles away. What in the world am I going to do? And of course, there are concerns over travel-related expenses, parking expenses, transportation costs, rising costs of fuel, so on and so forth, all of which are legitimate concerns. So in light of this, we surveyed VGEA members to get their opinion on the telework policy itself, the application process, And we rolled this survey out in late May, I believe. And what we did with that survey is we compiled the results. We made it available to the media, but we also turned it over to the Youngkin administration, and in particular Secretary Lynn McDermott. Secretary McDermott is Secretary of the Administration, and in that position she has oversight and oversees Department of Human Resource Management, Division of General Services, so essentially the people and places that are essential to running the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we sat down with Secretary McDermott on June the 9th. We shared the data with her that we received from our members, which was extremely enlightening. And cannot thank the members that took the time out of their day to fill out that survey to give us data to report back to the administration. There were a number of items that they were unaware of. There were a number of issues or concerns that they had a blind spot to. But, you know, that's our role as an association representing the interests of state employees. You know, we take your issues and make them known, and make sure that the administration or the government generally doesn't have those blind spots, and at least are aware of the issues that you may be facing. After walking through the data that, again, the administration in some capacities found enlightening or surprising, we asked for a delay in the implementation of the telework policy until September 12th, which is after Labor Day and when many folks or many children go back to school. So we thought that this would not only give state employees an additional few months to make child care arrangements or elder care arrangements or reorganize their lives in order to accommodate a return to work, but also would alleviate a lot of pressure around child care because most K through 12 kids would be back in school at that point in time. Unfortunately, the administration declined our request to delay the implementation of the telework policy, but we were given assurances by Secretary McDermott that particularly in instances where there was a concern or issue over child care, elder care, or where there was an employee that may live more than 50 or 60 miles away from the office they're assigned to, or in the few instances where state employees were hired during the COVID-19 pandemic and were given assurances that they could stay remote or permanent telework, that those would be given special consideration. They would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And I think that was said with a wink and a nod that they would be liberally granted. Of course, it remains to be seen how the data plays out. We're anxiously awaiting that data, but it's our hope and it's my hunch that, you know, we wouldn't have gotten that treatment or those assurances but for VGEA's advocacy and our members bringing their issues to the fore and making the administration aware of those. We gave it a few weeks, and then after the July 5th return to work deadline, we implemented a follow-up survey to allow state employees to give their perspective on the implementation of the revised telework policy, and we had over 1,100 responses. The media picked up on this data, and so too did many members of the administration and the General Assembly, and they were appreciative of this information. So again, thank you for those VGEA members who took time to share your thoughts and concerns with us. In light of that second follow-up survey, we scheduled a follow-up meeting with Secretary McDermott in mid-July, where we discussed the results of that survey, brought to light some areas where there was not uniform communication on the part of agency heads, and turned over some data, of course anonymous data, pointing Secretary McDermott in the direction of those agencies that may have mistakenly conveyed information that was not in line with the policy as intended by the Youngkin administration. So hopefully those issues have been sorted out since then. And also in that second meeting with Secretary McDermott, we rolled out our presumptive 2023 legislative agenda, which again, our VGEA members were integrally a part of. Thank you all for those who filled out our legislative legislative priority survey. And I'll go into the results of that here shortly. But before I get to that, like I mentioned before, we had a whole new cast of characters going into the 2022 General Assembly session. An entirely new administration from the top down: governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, cabinet. So, this happens. I'm not saying it's any fault on the Youngkin administrations by any means, but particularly when you get a cabinet and administration that's primarily coming from the private sector, there is some institutional knowledge that they just simply don't have, and it's incumbent upon VGEA and other institutions and advocacy groups to make sure they get up to speed. So we've been building that relationship with Secretary McDermott ever since she's come into office, and we're there. There has been a silver lining to this revised telework policy, where it has given us an opportunity to galvanize that relationship and establish a great working relationship with her office. Similarly, at the Department of Human Resource Management, we've got a new director, Director Janet Lawson. I believe she was the HR head for Hanover County previously, and we're making inroads with her as well. I believe Marshall Terry, the Executive Director of VGEA, Cynthia Britton, your president, and myself are sitting down with DHRM Director Janet Lawson later this week. Again, hopefully to start building that working relationship with her, so that not only can they be a resource to us, but that we can be a resource to them. And again, bring your thoughts, concerns, and priorities to the forefront of their minds. But before I get off of Secretary McDermott and DHRM Director Janet Lawson, I do want to thank Secretary McDermott. If you haven't gotten your summer 2022 foresight yet, I would anxiously await that. Secretary McDermott did, as a showing of good faith and a willingness to build a relationship with VGEA and its members, sat down for over an hour with us, had a great sit-down interview with us, and shared her vision with what she'd like to accomplish as Secretary of the Administration, a little bit of information about her background, her approach to solving the Commonwealth's problems, and what we can come to expect her in the upcoming General Assembly session. So if you haven't read it yet, please keep an eye out for that. It's very enlightening, very interesting, and of course it's helpful to know who is your Secretary of Administration, what role do they fill, and that way it's not a stranger on the Hill. You get a better idea of who is managing the Commonwealth's workforce and facilities, so that's always helpful to have. So we hope to have a similar meeting with DHRM Director Janet Lawson again this week to start that conversation, and hopefully she'll be kind enough to oblige us with a similar sit-down interview, tell-all, so that we can convey to our members what exactly she stands for, what she hopes to accomplish in her position, what her role entails, and we think that would be enlightening to you guys. So again, at that last meeting with the Secretary McDermott, we rolled out the VGEA legislative agenda for 2023. Of course, compensation increases remains at the top of our list. We want to seek across-the-board increases to ensure existing pay raises are not outpaced by inflation. I think we've got a good shot of accomplishing that. What that looks like, I think, will vary based on what inflation looks like at the time. It's been a pretty volatile market. I think right now we're upwards of 9%, maybe 9.5% inflation. So that would essentially wipe out those 10% raises that we're anticipating over the next 2 years. We want to make sure that we're not outpaced by inflation. And like I said, we've got some support already in both chambers. And I think the most recent budget update we received from Secretary Cummings and the governor indicate that the Commonwealth's working with surplus revenues. We're in great financial stead despite coming out of a pandemic. So there are resources available. I know the governor's administration is prioritizing tax breaks to lower the cost of living on not just state employees, but residents of the Commonwealth as a whole. But we want to make sure that that's not the only relief that's given to our state employees. We need to make sure that our state employees are compensated for the great work they do. In addition to across-the-board raises, We're also going to support increases that the administration may choose to push, more targeted raises that the Secretary mentioned in her interview, and to us personally. And that may include a reinstatement of performance-based pay increases or targeted pay increases in areas such as IT, something similar to what we did for DOC correctional officers and deputy sheriffs last year to address those critical need areas. In addition to compensation increases, we're going to address telework again. We'd like to request a study either by JLARC, which is our Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, essentially our nonpartisan government think tank, or the Department of Human Resources Management, to study and determine which jobs are most suitable for a permanent transition to telework, and to flesh out the potential cost savings to the Commonwealth if those positions that are suitable were moved to permanent telework status. In addition, you guys may have seen in the press, there's a code section that maps out aspirational targets for the Commonwealth's agencies for telework at each agency. We think it may behoove us and be advisable to introduce legislation seeking to increase that aspirational target for telework at each agency. Then finally, we want to make sure that our retirees are well taken care of. We've got a meeting with VRS later this week to see what we can do for our retirees in terms of making life insurance policies available or more affordable to them through VRS. And then we also want to see what we can do to increase the retirees' health insurance credit. We hear from our members regularly that that is of vital importance to them. And since we have increased the funded status of that retiree health insurance credit and the Commonwealth is working with surplus revenues, we think that's certainly worth exploring, and plan to get more information on that after our meeting with the officials at Virginia Retirement Systems later this week. So that's what we're looking forward to in terms of our legislative agenda going into 2023. But we also want to add a little bit more of a personal flair to our General Assembly session this past year. Regularly, we have an annual lobby day, which is critically important. That's when we invite our board and members of VGEA down to the Capitol one day during the General Assembly session to help share your story, to meet your legislators, and to advocate for the VGEA's legislative agenda. But what we'd like to do this year, and we'll ask for each of y'all's consideration, we want to host the VGEA's inaugural legislative reception to immediately follow VGEA's lobby day, or perhaps maybe even to do it the night before. And what we envision here is hosting a reception for VGEA members from across the Commonwealth, but also invite our statewide elected officials, Governor Youngkin, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, Attorney General Jason Miyares, along with every single member of Virginia's 140 legislators and their staff, to come and mix and mingle, get to know VGEA members, officers, directors, and get a better understanding and an opportunity to talk with our members and our members to talk with legislators in an environment that's less pressure-filled and time-constrained like our meetings usually are during the lobby day. So we're still in the planning stages of this, but we want to make this a huge event. And I think it'd be a great way to continue to involve our members in what we're doing down at the General Assembly. And more importantly, I think it's important for the legislators to see just exactly how many folks and the type of folks that are here keeping the wheels running for the Commonwealth every year, and to get a personal feel of what you go through every day to make sure that the Commonwealth is running smoothly, efficiently, and safely. That's about all I have to go over with you today. Again, thank you so much for your support of VGEA. We can't do any of this advocacy without your support. And thank you for what you do for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And of course, I'm here as a resource for you. If you have any questions, please direct them through the info@vgea.org email address, or by calling VGEA. And again, please keep an eye out for upcoming surveys. Your input is critically important to charting what we do. I take orders from you guys, and so it's important for us to hear what you're going through on a day-to-day basis, what would be most helpful to you, and what issues you're facing. And we can try to come up with solutions to that, either through the legislative process, the regulatory process, or working through the administration. So in closing, it's a pleasure to represent state employees in VGEA. I hope you will continue to trust me with your confidence to represent your interests down at the General Assembly and with the Governor's administration. And with that, I'll leave you to the rest of your annual meeting. Thanks again.
Dylan has been a true asset to VGEA. He knows almost everybody down at the General Assembly. I've been introduced to him, Marshall, Rick, we all work together trying to get things done. But it is critical that you come to the legislative day. Several of the new board members came last year. You're most welcome to talk to them, but that's how we can get things done. The more people we have, better in large crowds to get things done. So please, if you can, news will be coming out about Legislative Day. If you don't get the information, just give Marshall a call and he can tell you when it is. But this is very critical for us going forward and getting the things that we need as state employees and as retirees.